thank you for checking out What is God's Sabbath Truth. Now, this is a book. This is different than an issue of the magazine. It is a book that Aubrey Duncan wrote. He's a friend of mine, and I've had the opportunity and the privilege to talk with him on, I call him up about every couple weeks, and he educates me on so many things. The man has done his study, and what was fascinating to me is to find out, and the very beginning of this book, he gives his testimony at how he was a drug addict and how God brought him from being a complete drug addict to being saved and serving God. And so that's where this book starts out. To give you a quick overview, let me bring up the table of contents here and show you what you can expect, okay? And so here's the table of contents here, and the chapter 1, let's just quickly go through it so you can see what to expect. Chapter 1, grace that transforms, power to obey. What that is he begins to go into his personal testimony. He explains his personal testimony. And the chapter, as I skip down here, probably the one I want to spend the most time on. And people, some things are going to catch other people's attention more than others. But chapter 12, confronting objections to God's Sabbath. For me, that was a pretty fascinating chapter. And so I'm going to skip over here. I'm going to skip over here to chapter 12 because this one caught my attention the most as I was reading through here. And Aubrey does not mince words at all. And I'll give you an example. Creation week is not, and what it is, this chapter completely goes over confronting objections to God's Sabbath. And so if people have a problem with God's Sabbath, they'll usually throw these things at you. And so here's one. Creation week is not really a literal 7 days or 7 literal days, but rather 7,000 years. Therefore, God would not be talking about a literal seventh-day rest in the Sabbath commandment. Okay? And what I love about Aubrey is, notice that first line. What an insult to God. But you'll read on here, and he explains why that is just an insult to God. But he's very straightforward in how he explains things, and he explains why it was a 24-hour day and not 1,000 years. Okay, another objection. Jesus rose from the dead on the first day of the week, so we honor it as the Lord's day and made it the Sabbath day. And first sentence right out of the box. Here is a classic example of the devil's trickery of mixing truth with error and passing it off as the gospel of God to God's people. He does not play around. I love that about him. All right. So the next one. God's law includes the Sabbath commandment was nailed to the cross. Therefore, we no longer have to keep the law. What a frightening thought, And he goes on to talk about how the law is still important for us today. And he explains that there. I'll let you read that. But that's another objection. The disciples, here's the one. The disciples ceased to keep the Sabbath day and kept Sunday as the Lord's day. That's a fascinating study. I did that study before I read his book. And of course, he goes into great depth in that and brings up some great points. But it was fascinating to see that the disciples really did keep the Sabbath if you read through. And he goes through all the scriptures explaining that. So here's another one. Paul teaches that we may choose whatever day we want, so long as we choose one day in 7 to rest. And he explains why it is Sabbath, the day. And so he goes on for chapter 13, but that was the chapter as kind of a highlight to you that really caught my attention because some of those objections I didn't know the answer to. And so, guys, if you would like to buy Aubrey's book and really get an in-depth study on why Sabbath is still for us today, then buy this book. It's $9.99. It is a discount from what you could get it on, say, the Kindle store or something like that. So normally it's $12.99. You can get it for $9.99 here with us. He gave us a deal on that. All right. Thank you so much for looking at it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, take a look. You can get a discount instead of $4.99 per issue. These two are issues right here. If you subscribe, you can get the latest issue for $2.99 a month. Talk to you later.